Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are jumping straight into a really complex legal battle. It happened in India, but honestly, the effects rippled out globally. It's all about drug patents, international trade rules, and that huge issue, access to affordable medicines.
Yeah, we've looked through the sources you shared, quite a stack of articles, research notes, and they really lay out the core arguments and the fascinating history of India's, well, pretty unique patent laws.
And how the highest court there tried to navigate this tension, this real balancing act between protecting innovation on one hand and public health on the other.
Exactly.
So our mission here is pretty clear. We want to unpack the main conflict in this case, trace how India's patent system got to where it was, understand the big shakeup from international agreements like TRIPS.
And see exactly how the court used India's specific legal safeguards.
Right, we're not easing into this one. We're going straight into the details from the sources. Let's get started.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The case, formally, is MS Cancer Patients Aid Association versus the Union of India and others. And the others prominently featured a major global player, Novartis AG.
And the thing at the center of it all, the product was a specific version of a drug for treating a type of leukemia, Imatinib Mesylate. You might have heard of it as Gleevec or Gleevec.
Right, those are the brand names.
Yeah.
But the specific issue was the beta-crystalline form of Imatinib Mesylate.
So the big legal question was, does this specific form qualify for a patent under Indian law? And crucially, how does it stack up against this one particular part of the law, Section 3, say?
That section became absolutely pivotal.
And what really jumps out from the sources is this wasn't, just about one drug in isolation. It played out against this huge backdrop.
A real clash of principles, almost. You've got patent law trying to incentivize invention, then India's international trade commitments like the TRIPS agreement pulling in one direction.
And then this absolutely vital public health goal, keeping essential medicines affordable, especially the generic drugs that India became so well known for producing.
Definitely. And to really get why this Novartis case was such a landmark, you kind of have to step back and look at India's patent history. It was, well, different for a long time, especially before 2005. The key law was the Patents Act of 1970.
And that 1970 Act, it didn't just pop out of nowhere. It was shaped by some influential thinking, like reports from Justice Iyengar. They saw patents not just as rewards, but as tools, tools for national economic strategy.
The idea was explicitly to stop companies using patent monopolies in ways that could hurt the public.
And a really striking feature of that 1970 law was Section 5. What did that do?
Section 5 was critical. It basically said, no product patents for substances used as food, medicine, or drugs. Full stop. You could patent the process, the method you use to make it, but not the final medicine itself.
Just the recipe, not the cake. And the result of that policy, our sources say it completely reshaped the Indian pharmaceutical scene.
Oh, dramatically. Look at the market share figures. In 1970, multinational corporations, the big global companies, had about 68% of the Indian market. Indian companies had just 32%.
Okay.
Fast forward to 2004, just before the big changes really kicked in, it completely flipped. Indian companies held 77% of the market. Multinationals were down to 23%.
Wow, that's a huge shift. How did only allowing process patents cause that?
Well, it meant Indian companies were free to figure out their own ways to make the same essential drugs, as long as they didn't copy the patented process. It spurred a ton of innovation in manufacturing, led to India becoming self-sufficient in basic drug ingredients.
And becoming this massive exporter of affordable generics. Right, that's where the pharmacy of the world nickname comes from.
Exactly that. Supplying low-cost generics, famously including crucial HIV/AIDS drugs, to many other developing countries. It was built on that process patent system.
Okay, so India had this thriving domestic industry built on a system that deliberately excluded product patents for medicines. But then came TRIPS.
Right. The Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. TRIPS. It emerged from global trade negotiations, the Gatti-Uruguay round, and aimed to create minimum IP standards for all members of the new World Trade Organization.
And India joined the WTO in 1995.
Yep, which meant India was now bound by TRIPS rules.
And the big collision course with India's existing system was
Article 27 of TRIPS. It required member countries to provide product patents in essentially all fields of technology. And it explicitly mentioned pharmaceuticals and agricultural chemicals. That was a direct contradiction to India's Section 5.
But TRIPS gave countries like India some time to adjust, didn't it? It wasn't an immediate switch.
No, there were transitional periods. Article 65.4 gave developing countries until January 1st, 2005 to fully implement product patents in those tricky areas like pharma. And during that transition, TRIPS had other requirements too.
Like the mailbox.
Yes, Article 70.8 required countries like India to set up a system, a sort of mailbox, where companies could file applications for these product patents before the law actually allowed them. And Article 70.9 dealt with potentially granting exclusive marketing rights, or EMRs, for those products under certain conditions.
What happened when India was maybe a bit slow in setting up even those mailbox and EMR provisions?
Well, it led to trouble. Both the U.S. and the European communities took India to the WTO dispute settlement system. They argued India wasn't meeting its TRIPS obligations.
So international pressure facing potential trade sanctions.
Exactly. That really forced India's hand to start amending its Patents Act.
Which led to a series of changes in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Right. First, in 1999, an amendment came in actually backdated to Jan 1st, 1995, specifically to get that mailbox system running and allow for EMRs. That was a direct response to the WTO rulings.
Then more changes followed.
Yes. A really big overhaul came with the 2002 Amendment Act. That made lots of changes, like redefining invention, tweaking Section 3. But importantly, it also tried to build in some public interest safeguards.
Like Section 83.
Yeah, Section 83 was new. It laid out general principles, saying things like patents shouldn't impede public health and patented drugs should be available at affordable prices. Trying to balance things, you know.
And then the final deadline, January 1st, 2005, was approaching fast.
It was. So the 2005 Amendment Act was the crucial one. It actually came in first as a temporary measure, an ordinance, just to meet that deadline. And this is the act that finally deleted Section 5.
So this is when India officially started allowing product patents for medicines and agricultural chemicals.
That's the moment.
Yeah.
And the official statement explaining the act, the statement of objects and reasons, makes it crystal clear. It explicitly mentions the need to meet the TRIPS deadline to avoid WTO action and to deal with all those applications sitting in the mailbox. It was very much driven by those international obligations.
Okay, so India opens the door to product patents. But as you mentioned, it also introduced this very specific, very debated safeguard, Section 3T. And this seems to be the absolute heart of the Novartis case.
It really is. Section 3T, as amended in 2005, became India's main tool against something called evergreening.
Evergreening, that's where companies make small tweaks to existing drugs just to get a new patent and extend their monopoly, right?
Exactly. Making minor modifications to a known substance to try and keep the patent protection going long after the original patent should have expired.
And the sources suggest the lawmakers knew this was a risk.
Oh, absolutely. The parliamentary debates around the 2005 amendment show clear concerns. Members of parliament were worried about drug prices potentially shooting up. They specifically mentioned Gleevec's price compared to generics that were already available in India pre-2005.
So they wanted safeguards.
They pushed for them. Things like limiting patents to truly new drugs, no patents just for finding a new use for an old drug, keeping procedures like pre-grant opposition where people could challenge a patent application before it was granted.
And Section 3 was presented as the solution.
It was framed by the government as the key safeguard, especially for medicines, to address exactly those fears about evergreening. And importantly, the Supreme Court later backed this up.
How so?
The court explicitly said Section 3D isn't just some minor clause or put in for abundant caution. It sets a higher standard for patentability, specifically for chemical substances and pharmaceuticals. Its job is to prevent repetitive patenting based on, as the court put it, spurious grounds.
And there was an explanation added to 3 as well.
Yes, the 2005 amendment added an explanation clarifying that for things like salts, esters, polymorphs, basically new forms of known substances, they wouldn't be patentable unless they showed significant differences in properties with regard to efficacy.
Efficacy. That word again, it sounds crucial.
Absolutely crucial.
Okay, so let's bring it back to Novartis and their beta-crystalline form of Imatinib Mesylate. How did the court apply this Section 3D test?
Right. First, the court had to figure out what's the known substance here. They look back at the earlier patent, the Zimmermann patent, which covered the basic imatinib molecule, the free base, and its salts, including Imatinib Mesylate.
So Imatinib Mesylate itself was considered known.
Yes, the court concluded Imatinib Mesylate was already known from that prior patent, Its basic ability to treat leukemia was also known.
And Novartis's argument was that their beta-crystalline form was different, better.
They claimed it was. They said this specific crystal structure, the beta form, which they made from the free base or another form, had advantages.
Hmm.
Better flow properties for manufacturing, more stable, less likely to absorb moisture.
Okay, practical advantages.
And importantly, they claimed higher bioavailability compared to the free base form, meaning more of the drug gets absorbed into the body.
So the court's job was to weigh those claims against Section 3's requirement for enhancement of known efficacy.
Exactly. And this is where the interpretation of efficacy really mattered. The court looked at the dictionary definition, the ability to produce a desired result. But then they asked, what's the desired result for a medicine?
It has to be about treating the patient, right?
Precisely. The court concluded that for medicines under Section 3 TAM, efficacy must mean therapeutic efficacy. Does it do a better job of treating the actual disease?
So those other properties, better flow, stability, didn't cut it.
The court said those are essentially physicochemical properties. They might make manufacturing or storing the drug easier, maybe more consistent, but they don't automatically mean the drug works better in the patient's body. The court viewed these as inherent properties of different crystal forms, not necessarily proof of enhanced therapeutic effect.
Okay, but what about bioavailability? More drug getting into the system sounds like it should be more effective.
That's the intuitive thought, right? And the court definitely considered it. But they analyzed it carefully. They looked at definitions and commentary, noting that bioavailability is about the rate and extent of absorption.
How fast and how much gets in?
Right. Now, a drug obviously needs to be bioavailable to work at all, but does increased bioavailability automatically equal enhanced therapeutic efficacy? The court wasn't convinced it did on its own.
Why not?
Well, you could absorb more of a drug, but maybe it doesn't actually improve the clinical outcome for the patient compared to the existing form. And here's a fascinating point from the sources. One of Novartis's own affidavits apparently stated the beta form had higher bioavailability than the free base. But
Yeah.
their original patent application for Imatinib, the Zimmerman patent, had stated that all the pharmacological effects were seen with the free base or its salts, which includes the mesylate salt.
Implying the therapeutic effect was similar.
It suggested that, yes, it implied the mesylate salt form, which includes the beta-crystalline, and the original free base form, had comparable therapeutic effects, even if bioavailability differed somewhat.
So putting it all together, the court felt Novartis hadn't shown that their beta-crystalline form offered a genuine improvement in treating the disease compared to the known Imatinib Mesylate.
That was the core finding. They ruled that the beta-crystalline form did not demonstrate enhanced therapeutic efficacy over the known substance, Imatinib Mesylate.
And failing that specific Section 3D test meant.
It meant it wasn't patentable under that section. But the court didn't stop there. They also looked at whether it qualified as an invention under other parts of the law, sections 2.1 no J and 2.1 yay. They found it didn't meet those tests either. Since Imatinib Mesylate was already known from the Zimmerman patent, creating the beta-crystalline form wasn't seen as a truly new product stemming from an invention with a significant technical advance or economic significance over what was already known.
They felt it was kind of an obvious development for someone skilled in the field.
Essentially, yes. Given the existing knowledge from the Zimmerman patent, developing this specific crystal form wasn't considered inventive enough to warrant a separate patent.
So the final word from India's Supreme Court for Novartis.
Their appeals were dismissed. Novartis was denied the product patent for the beta-crystalline form of Imatinib Mesylate. It failed the test for being an invention, and critically, it failed the specific patentability test set out in Section 3 of the Indian Patents Act.
Wow, okay, so this deep dive really traced quite a path. We went from India's early patent system deliberately designed to boost local industry,
Through the huge changes forced by international agreements like TRIPS.
and then saw how India specifically built in safeguards like Section 3 when it finally did allow product patents for drugs.
And the Novartis case became the crucial test of that safeguard. It showed the court upholding the principle that minor modifications, even if they have some advantages, don't automatically get new patent protection if they don't enhance the actual therapeutic effect for patients.
It wasn't just about Gleevec then. It was about interpreting and validating this specific legal tool India created to prevent evergreening and maintain access to affordable generics. So hopefully, walking through all that history, the legal arguments, the court's reasoning, hopefully gives you, our listener, a much clearer sense of just how complex these issues are. The intersection of law, international trade, economics, and ultimately public health.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? Looking forward, you have this constant global need for affordable medicines, especially in developing countries. But you also have the drive for pharmaceutical innovation, which patents are supposed to encourage.
Yeah, that tension isn't going away.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So the provocative thought maybe is, how can patent systems around the world, not just in India, continue to evolve to strike that incredibly difficult balance effectively? How do we keep encouraging genuine breakthroughs while making sure life-saving treatments actually reach the people who need them?